scientists at Los Alamos National Laboratories and their sister laboratory, Sandia Labs, and it indicated immediately to them that there was something unique about the image on the shroud, something that was not typical of any other images.
Barrie Schwortz wasn't supposed to find anything. He was there to photograph the Shroud of Turin, nothing more. But the moment his images developed, he froze.
Regarding the Shroud of Turin, reports say there is new evidence the shroud is 2,000 years old, which coincides.
Something was there that shouldn't exist. He didn't tell the public everything he saw. Not then, not for years. And when DNA was later extracted from the ancient linen, the results only deepened the mystery. Why did it show traces from multiple regions across the world? Why did the results point in so many directions at once? Why did Schwortz hesitate before speaking publicly? And what did he discover that stayed with him for the rest of his life? The cloth that refuses to be explained. It looks ordinary at first, just a long, aged strip of linen, quiet, fragile, easy to overlook. But the moment you see the image on it, everything changes. Faint, almost ghost-like, is the outline of a man. His body stretched out, his hands crossed, his head tilted forward. And what makes it even more unsettling, the image appears on both the front and the back.
It bears an image on it, ventral, front, and back dorsal, of a human figure.
As if, at some point in history, a real human body had been laid inside it, and the cloth folded over from head to toe. For centuries, this object has been known as the Shroud of Turin.
What's the Shroud of Turin?
The Shroud of Turin is believed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth.
And no matter how many times scientists examine it, it refuses to give a simple answer. The cloth itself is about 14 feet long, made from linen, and according to historical records, it first appeared in the 1350s. Since 1578, it has been preserved inside Turin Cathedral, where it remains today. People travel from all over the world just to stand in the same room with it. Some expect to see nothing special. Others expect something sacred. But almost everyone leaves with the same question. How did this image get there? Because the man on the cross shows clear signs of crucifixion. There are wounds on his wrists and feet, marks across his back that look like whip marks, a deep wound in his side, even small punctures around the head, matching what would happen from thorns pressed into skin.
The blood stains, the brutal whipping marks, the nail-pierced hands and feet, and even the crown of thorns.
These details aren't random. They follow the exact pattern described in ancient accounts of crucifixion. And then there's the blood. Scientists who studied the stains confirmed it is real human blood.
This is human blood, right?
Correct.
And it's actually, usually blood dries like brown or black, but this has stayed red.
Not paint, not dye. Real blood. Some tests identified it as type AB. Even more unsettling, the blood appears to have soaked into the cloth before the body image formed. That means the stains came first. The image came later, which immediately raises a disturbing question. If someone forged this in medieval times, how could they control that sequence? How could they place blood first and then create a perfectly aligned body image over it? What truly shocks researchers is how the image exists on the cloth. Under a microscope, there are no pigments, no brush strokes, no signs of paint. The image only affects the very top layer of the fibers. It doesn't penetrate deeper. It doesn't soak through. It's so superficial. It's thinner than a human hair. It's almost like the surface was gently altered, without physically touching most of the cloth itself. Even today, scientists struggle to explain how that's possible.
If you look at the biblical tradition, that is where Jesus was lanced on the cross. It would be in about that place.
Because any normal method, painting, dyeing, or burning, would leave more serious damage. This image does not. Then something happened in 1898 that changed everything. When the cloth was photographed for the first time, the photographer noticed something chilling. The negative image looked clearer than the original. The face became more defined. The features are more human. It was as if the cloth had preserved a photographic negative centuries before cameras were even invented. And when modern experts analyzed the image using digital tools, they found something even more impossible. The image contains three-dimensional information. That means it holds depth and shape, not just flat shading. When converted into 3D models, the body appears naturally formed, with accurate proportions. Paintings don't do that. Photographs don't even do that naturally. Yet, this cloth somehow does. So how does a medieval artifact contain properties that modern technology still cannot fully reproduce? Which is exactly why, in 1978, when a professional photographer named Barrie Schwortz came face-to-face with it, he wasn't expecting anything unusual. But what happened next would challenge everything he thought he knew. Barrie Schwortz, the Jewish skeptic with the camera. Barrie Schwortz was born in 1946 in California, into a Jewish family. He became a professional photographer, skilled in capturing precise images, but religion and ancient relics were never part of his life. In 1978, the Shroud of Turin research project
behind the scenes of what we did in 1978. Because whenever we hear the term scientific research project,
chose him as the official documenting photographer. He accepted the job with one clear expectation. The Shroud was a clever medieval fake, a painting designed to fool believers. His role was purely scientific, neutral, and detached. He was not there to prove anything, only to record every detail accurately. Over 5 days in Turin Cathedral, Schwortz photographed the 14-foot cloth under every possible type of light: ultraviolet, infrared, and microscopic. He captured every fold, fiber, and faint trace of the image of the crucified man.
When they put a photograph of the Shroud of Turin into the VP8, they got the natural relief of a human form.
At first, the results seemed ordinary, but as the hours passed, he noticed something that didn't make sense. The image had no brush strokes, no pigments, no dye patterns, nothing that could explain how a medieval artist would have created it. The bloodstains were real human blood, appearing exactly where wounds should be, and they had soaked into the fibers before the image itself appeared. Nothing in his training could account for these details. The more Schwortz documented, the more the evidence refused to fit his original assumptions. The Shroud's features behaved in ways that no known artistic technique could reproduce. The image existed only on the very top fibers, yet contained three-dimensional information when photographed, revealing depth and structure. This was beyond what any medieval forgery could achieve. For a man with no theological stake, this created a tension between skepticism and undeniable evidence. Over the next 17 years, Schwortz privately wrestled with what his camera had recorded. He did not rush to conclusions, and he did not seek to persuade anyone. The Shroud itself was dictating the narrative. In 1955, Schwortz founded Shroud.com, providing an archive of images, research, and documentation. His goal was clear: to offer a reliable resource based on facts, not faith claims. The website became a cornerstone for anyone seeking thorough, accurate information about the Shroud, and it continues under Joe Marino after Schwortz's passing in 2024. His careful documentation, meticulous attention to detail, and refusal to exaggerate or speculate without evidence made him one of the most respected figures in the Shroud community. The investigation that shook the skeptics. In 1978, the Shroud of Turin research project, known as STURP, assembled a team of 32 scientists for an investigation unlike any before. their mission was clear: examine the shroud with every tool available and determine once and for all how the image was made.
Which had an article about a group of American scientists who had been permitted by the Vatican to examine the Shroud of Turin using the latest technology.
Over 5 long days, they worked tirelessly, logging more than 120 hours of study. They brought in cutting-edge technology from NASA and JPL, ultraviolet and infrared light sources, and powerful microscopes. Every inch of the cloth was scrutinized, every fiber examined, every stain photographed and analyzed. The goal was simple, but the results were anything but ordinary. The scientists expected to find evidence of forgery, pigments, brush strokes, perhaps some scorch marks from an artistic attempt at depth. Instead, the shroud refused to conform. No pigments, no dye, no directionality that suggested a hand guided a brush, no scorch marks. Microscopic examination revealed something astonishing. The image exists only on the very top fibers of the linen. It is not painted, not burned, not artificially applied. The researchers concluded that the marks were caused by an extremely fine oxidation of the fibers themselves. The surface of the cloth had changed, subtly and mysteriously, without the use of any traditional method. Then there was the blood. The stains were real human blood, type AB.
When we talk about the image itself, but the blood absorbs all the way through, and it's type AB blood. This is Semitic human blood.
And critically, the evidence showed the blood soaked into the cloth before the image appeared. The sequence made forgery impossible. The team checked every conventional theory and every creative possibility. Nothing fit. The shroud's image didn't behave like anything a medieval artist or even modern science could reproduce. It contained 3-dimensional information, measurable depth, and shading that would confound painters even with today's technology. It wasn't just unusual, it was inexplicable. Barrie Schwortz was there throughout, camera in hand, documenting everything. As a trained skeptic, he approached the project with caution and doubt. He believed he would confirm a forgery, a clever medieval trick. But as each day passed, the evidence refused to cooperate. By the end of the week, even he could no longer ignore the facts. "The evidence changed my mind after 17 years, he would later admit. His words captured the tension in the room. The team had come to test assumptions, but the shroud refused to be tested. Instead, it challenged them. The work was methodical and exhausting. The STURP team recorded measurements, took hundreds of photographs, and compiled thousands of detailed notes. Yet even after all the data was gathered, questions remained. Why does the image appear only on the surface? How could it contain 3-dimensional detail? Why did the blood soak first and the image appear later? These questions are still discussed in research circles today, quietly sparking debate among experts who prefer not to speculate too loudly. Some say certain results were so unexpected they remain a source of quiet astonishment even decades later. By the end of those 5 days, every conventional explanation had been ruled out. The shroud was not a painting, not a scorch, not a photograph in the medieval sense. The official conclusion: the image could not be explained by any artistic or chemical method known at the time, or even now. And Schwortz, the man whose camera captured every detail, left Turin with a lasting realization. The object he had photographed was not just a historical relic. It was a mystery that refused to be contained, a puzzle that would follow him for the rest of his life. Even now, researchers return to the STURP data with awe. Every fiber, every stain, every subtle shadow on the cloth continues to challenge understanding. The shroud had started as a scientific test, but by the time the week ended, it had become something far more profound. The question lingered. What exactly caused the image? And why did it defy every expectation the team had arrived with? The investigation had ended, but the mystery was only beginning. The blood that tells a crucifixion story. One of the most astonishing aspects of the Shroud of Turin is the blood. It isn't paint. It isn't dye. It is real human blood, type AB, with chemical markers that tell a story of extreme suffering. Scientists who analyzed it found high levels of bilirubin, a compound that rises when a person experiences massive trauma. Normally, blood dries and darkens over time, turning brown or black. But the stains on the shroud remain a vivid reddish color, exactly what you would expect from someone who had endured intense physical punishment and prolonged bleeding before death. It's as if the blood itself refused to hide its story. The placement of the blood tells an even more striking tale. Over 100 marks across the back match the Roman flagrum, the whip described in historical accounts. Nail wounds appear in the wrists and feet. There's a deep wound in the side that aligns perfectly with the piercing of the spear described in the Gospels. Abrasions on the shoulders reflect the weight of a heavy beam being carried. Forensic pathologists studying the patterns of the blood flows say they are consistent with a body taken down from a cross after hours of crucifixion. Every mark, every smear, every tiny drop aligns with what would happen in real-life crucifixion trauma. Dr. Alan Adler, a chemist specializing in blood, confirmed that the stains are genuine human blood. He found serum albumin present, a protein that remains even after centuries, which is another marker of authenticity. More than that, the way the blood interacts with the body image on the cloth is telling. The blood appears to have been deposited first, before the body image formed. That means the stains were not an afterthought. The shroud preserved the sequence of events. Trauma first, image second. Fans and researchers alike have been fascinated and puzzled. How could anyone in the Middle Ages, without knowledge of human anatomy, physics of blood flow, or forensic detail, reproduce this with such precision? Some suggest the blood tells the story of a real crucifixion too perfectly to be a coincidence. The patterns, the coloration, and the positioning all point to extreme suffering, consistent with historical accounts. The question lingers: what if the blood itself is speaking? What if it records what science alone cannot explain? This is not just evidence of injury, it is evidence that seems to narrate an entire ordeal. The shroud's blood provides a biological record of trauma and death, aligning almost uncannily with descriptions in the Gospels. Even today, the blood on the shroud is a subject of quiet debate.
The Shroud of Turin. The cloth has remained an image of a man believed to be the burial cloth after his death on the cross.
In research circles, some results were so precise and consistent with historical crucifixion trauma that they still leave experts astonished. Fans wonder, could this be one of the clearest physical records of events described nearly 2,000 years ago? And the answer is far from simple. Keeping the mystery alive. The shocking DNA. In 2015, researchers at the University of Padua took a closer look at the Shroud of Turin using a surprisingly modern method. They vacuumed dust from the cloth and analyzed it for DNA. What they found stunned even longtime shroud enthusiasts. The plant DNA alone came from dozens of species, many native to the Mediterranean and the Middle East. But there were also traces from regions as far away as India. Human mitochondrial DNA told its own story. Various haplotypes suggested that people from different ethnic backgrounds had handled the cloth over the centuries, leaving behind tiny fragments of their own genetic material. Barrie Schwortz, who had photographed and documented the shroud decades earlier, had always approached these discoveries with measured caution. He never claimed that any DNA proved miracles or resurrection, but he did say something important. Science cannot be ignored. In archived interviews and writings on Shroud.com, Schwortz noted that the DNA patterns
an interactive experience with a replica of the shroud as the real shroud remains in Turin, Italy,
are perfectly consistent with a cloth that had been heavily venerated. Pilgrims kissing, touching, or simply being near the shroud would leave traces over time. This doesn't diminish its mystery. It explains why a sacred object can contain genetic fingerprints from so many sources without losing authenticity. Even after Schwortz passed away in 2024, his legacy continues. Joe Marino and the Shroud.com team maintain the archive, ensuring the data, images, and analyses remain accessible. Schwortz's work emphasizes careful observation, allowing the shroud to tell its story through evidence, not exaggeration. And in 2026, conversations sparked by his archives remain alive and active, especially after the DNA findings. Fans and researchers alike are buzzing over the details. Could the plant DNA from India and traces of human DNA from Africa hint at an ancient pilgrimage route? Could it show that people from many nations revered the cloth long before it arrived in Europe? The diversity of the DNA doesn't fit a neat story of a medieval forgery. Instead, it hints at a far broader journey, a history hidden between fibers and dust, waiting to be interpreted. The shroud seems to carry the echoes of countless hands and footsteps, centuries of devotion recorded in the tiniest fragments of life. The DNA adds a new dimension to what Schwortz had always maintained. Even as a skeptic, the science demanded attention. It doesn't claim miracles, but it does confirm centuries of human interaction with an object of extraordinary significance. The Shroud of Turin is not just an image on linen. It is a silent witness to history, carrying botanical and genetic traces of people, places, and time. So the question remains, what stories do those tiny strands of DNA hold? What journeys, what hidden paths across the ancient world might they reveal? Schwortz never claimed to have all the answers, but his decades of careful documentation show one thing clearly: the science of the shroud cannot be dismissed. And as researchers continue to study it, fans keep asking, speculating, and wondering, could the DNA finally map a pilgrimage story that history forgot to record? The Shroud of Turin refuses to fit neatly into any box, and some of the most controversial data are the ones scientists quietly whisper about. In 1988, carbon dating suggested the cloth was medieval, but critics argue the sample tested came from a repaired patch, not the original linen. Non-destructive tests since then have hinted at much earlier dates, keeping debate alive. Even DNA results spark caution. Some labs reportedly hesitate to publish full analyses, concerned the findings might ignite controversy or clash with entrenched assumptions. Rumors swirl in research circles. Fans are asking, could these hesitations mean the shroud is an ultimate faith-science puzzle? Could the mix of plant and human DNA markers, spanning continents, hint at ancient journeys and hidden veneration by people from many nations? And what if this diversity explains how the cloth survived centuries of travel, war, and secrecy? The Shroud of Turin still guards its secrets, and the DNA only deepens the mystery. What do you think it really means? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more shocking revelations and untold stories from history.